Alright, Chiefs are back. We're talking FF7. We're talking Rebirth. We're talking Remake. We're talking episode intermission, actually. Talking all of them at this point. So I seen a kind of interesting question on Twitter recently. It's a very simple question, and when I initially seen it, I thought I had the answer right away. And then I got to thinking about it, and I was like, well, hang on, actually. I'm not entirely sure. The question was very simple. The Zack that we see at the end of episode intermission, what world is he in? When I read that question, my immediate response was Terror World, of course, right? That's what we know Zack to be in when it comes to the end of Remake and majority of Rebirth, right? And when it comes to episode intermission, for the longest time now, we've presumed that that's like a continuation of follow-up to the end of Remake, kind of seeing what's going on with Zack afterwards, right? There's always been some kind of weird shit surrounding that episode intermission scene. For one, what's with the people in the church? Why is Zack clean? Because he's dirty every other time we see him, for the most part, when it comes to the Remake project in general, really. And where the hell is Cloud? Obviously, as the years have gone on here, we've had countless ideas and theories, and once you actually get to Rebirth, and then you look back at that scene, it still doesn't make a lot of sense, right? Because we see what happens, right? We see Zack walk into Midgar, and it picks up with us in Sector 5, right? Him seeing the people on the screen, passing off Cloud to Kyrie, and then going and rescuing Aerith. So none of that really makes sense when it comes to this scene right here, where Zack is clearly clean, and he's dirty in Sector 5, but also there's no Cloud. There's no Cloud anywhere. Not even like when we had the wide shot right there before it zooms in on Zack at the steps. You don't see Cloud like posted up somewhere while he goes in here and tries to talk to Aerith potentially. Also, with the danger of the situation that they're in, Zack wouldn't be out here kind of contemplating what to say with Aerith, right? If anything, he probably would have ran inside with Cloud, right, to try to get him some help with Aerith or something along those lines, instead of just sitting out here trying to think of what to say. So this scene cannot be taking place before the events of Rebirth. Another question that's always plagued us here with this scene is the people in the church. What's going on with that, right? And a theory that's existed for a long time is the people in here are mourning Aerith, right? This is maybe a different world, a different timeline, Terror World. Aerith is dead, so these are people that were close to Aerith, the new Aerith, and Aerith helped them, and they're just mourning the loss of Aerith, which can make some sense given what we see in one of the scenes here towards the beginning of Rebirth, except that the timelines don't quite add up. In this case, I don't mean timelines as in the different worlds or whatever. I just mean like the times don't quite add up. Because if the episode intermission scene is taking place between the ending of Remake and the beginning of Rebirth, for one, again, clean Zack, no Cloud, but also we don't see Aerith's body on the news until Zack gets to the Sector 5 slums. It wouldn't really make a lot of sense for the people in the church to already be mourning Aerith's death or her passing or her unconscious state or whatever you want to call it, if we've yet to see her body on the public news, right? So it wouldn't make a lot of sense. So there already be a congregation of like 20, 30 people in the church mourning the loss of Aerith if we haven't even seen her death on the news, right? It is not public knowledge yet that Aerith is potentially dead. When it comes to the ending we get for episode intermission, one detail I've always put a lot of emphasis on that I feel like not enough people do when they talk about that shit is the people standing on the flowers. If these are people that knew Aerith, were close to Aerith, Aerith helped them, they knew Aerith was the flower girl, so on and so forth, why the hell would they be standing on her flowers? That's never made sense to me. I've always taken that as like a clear sign that these are people that don't know Aerith, they're not from the area, they don't know anything about the flowers and Aerith and so on and so forth, right? I've always taken it as people from another sector. The refugees from either the Reactor 1 bombing, the Reactor 5 bombing, or of course the Sector 7 platefall, which is the most likely answer. It's actually something that's confirmed to be in the game with the Yuffie DLC itself. Actually, I did a video talking about the ending, I've done 400 videos talking about the ending. But specifically a video where like you can, when you're running on the Sector 7 slums as Yuffie, you can get dialogue from NPCs talking about refugees from other sectors and things like that. So that's confirmed to already be a thing. Once I came across that information, made a video about it, that's where I've always stood on this conversation, is that the people in the church are just people from another sector, simply. Of course, the other possibility with the people in the church are that they're people that are dead and not aware of it, which is, I guess, technically true. That's also a possibility when it comes to Rebirth. We don't really know the nature of these worlds necessarily. There are within the planet. They're not comparable to parallel worlds, so to speak, according to Nojima. So I guess it's still a possibility they could be like Zack or Biggs or whatever, who are totally dead. But at the same time, there's also, if these other worlds are technically real, like Zack's interacting with people, so I don't think he's like totally dead either. I don't know. It's kind of weird, right? Why is Kyrie there, right? Kyrie's alive in our world. We're doing quests for Kyrie and shit, so I don't know what these worlds are. That's one of the problems talking about those shit, though. By the way, it's been quite a while since I've shown this guy on camera. Like, I got him back like last September, but he is massive now, and he's pretty good at catching mice. Now, when it comes to the dirty, clean Zack discussion, when it comes to this, you could chalk that up to like a continuity error, right? That maybe Zack is meant to be dirty during like the church scene, and they just didn't do that for some reason. Possible, right? But it still doesn't add up to like what should be going on in that situation in terms of like Zack should be kind of in a hurry. If this is taking place right after the end of Remake, before the beginning of Rebirth, he He should be kind of in a hurry, trying to find Aerith. He should have Cloud with him, so on and so forth, right? So that you could chalk up to continuity error, but it still doesn't make sense overall. It's kind of interesting when having this discussion about, what world is Zack in when it comes to episode intermission, is that since Rebirth has come out, it's been theorized that there's potentially 6 worlds. I've even heard it theorized that there's 7 worlds, but I think that 7th world is, supposed to be like the OG Final Fantasy VII's like timeline or world or whatever. I don't know how much weight there is to that. We'll talk about that in a second though too. Now when it comes to the idea of there being 6 worlds, I don't know for sure what it's based on. I think it's based on the stars, but people that do like translations with like the Ultimate shit have never talked about why they think that there's potentially 6 worlds. But when it comes to the different stamps that we have in the different timelines and worlds, the highest number we have is 6 stars, and then it counts backwards: 5 stars, 4 stars, 3 stars. And then we see Johnny in one of the worlds with the Shiba stamp, but we don't see the stars on it. But presumably that dog that Johnny's carrying under his arm has either 1 star or 2 star on it, and then there'd be another world we've yet to see, and maybe that's the world that Zack is in at the end of episode intermission. Technically, when it comes to the conversation of the stars in the other worlds, they could go higher if they wanted to, I guess. Like, the Shiba that Johnny's carrying could have like 7 stars or 8 stars or something. I'm just theorizing that they're going to go lower because that makes a little more sense. For the conversation of the OG FF7 having its own world, the potential 7th world, that's kind of existed, at least that part of the discussion of like that having its own timeline or whatever, that's existed for a while. Like when it comes to Remake, when we're in the Singularity and Cloud's floating above Midgar looking down at it, like that Midgar more so resembles the original FF7. Partially, it's the kanji symbols on the sides of the reactors. They're in like dark boxes, which a lot of times when you're playing Remake, that isn't always the case. Now, there are times where it is. So there could also be like a continuity error or something like that. But you also have the platforms that are going out from Midgar. When you look at the Midgar that's in the Singularity, and there's nothing on them. Where you look at like any actual sky shot of Midgar from like Remake or any like render of Remake's Midgar, there are structures on those outer platforms. And when you look at the original FF7's Midgar, there's not any. When it comes to the Remake project, while I'm a believer of like the small details mattering, there is like continuity errors. There's like skybox issues and shit. So it's possible that the Midgar we're seeing in the Singularity isn't maybe what it's supposed to be. But one thing that does point in the possible direction, the hint towards the maybe possibility of the original FF7 having its own world, is the wooden cross in the church at the end of episode intermission. Look, I've talked about this a lot on my channel the last couple of years. I don't want to regurgitate the shit I've been saying for the last couple of years, but simply put, the wooden cross you see in the church at the end of episode intermission, when Zack opens the doors, that wooden cross is there in every single iteration of the Sector 5 church that's ever existed since the original Final Fantasy VII up until we get to Remake. And then like Remake, it's the stone cross. And then like Ever Crisis and First Soldier and even Crisis Core, except for one scene, the cross is missing and replaced with that stone cross, right? Even now, with Rebirth on our hands, right, the second game in the Remake trilogy, anytime we're able to see that cross in the Sector 5 church and all these different worlds that we go to, it's always a stone cross, right? We never see the wooden cross again. Now, some people do believe that the wooden cross is there by accident. I find it kind of hard to believe that people would accidentally render a wooden cross. That seems kind of strange, especially when that's been such an iconic thing for the Sector 5 church that's intentionally missing from the Remake project. So it actually kind of added this conversation is a theory that we've never talked about on the channel, I don't believe. It's that maybe all the worlds we're seeing in the Remake project aren't real, right? They're all, conjured up by the planet. They're all within the live stream, whatever. Even our main group's world, because what differentiates each world, right? The stamp logos. So far, that's the only thing. It's just the different stamp logos that we're seeing, different stamp characters. And our group has one, right? Our main group's world, the Beagle world, it has its own stamp logo. And if you go back to the original FF7, I know that's the OG 1997, but throughout all the compilations, there's no other stamps, right? It wasn't until the Remake project that we started seeing the stamp logos, right? So you could maybe go with the idea that because our group's world has a stamp logo, that maybe it's also one of these conjured up worlds. That could, of course, explain why there's things that are different. Even though it seems like, Remake and Rebirth are following the OGFF7 pretty faithfully with some slight deviations here and there and stuff, that maybe that's why things are different, right? Because it's not the actual OGFF7 timeline. It's just another recreated world trying to do the FF7 story again. I don't know how much I subscribe to that idea, that theory. I'm not even touching on all that the theory has to offer. I don't even remember all the details of the theory. It's just something I've heard before. But since we're talking about the different worlds and different timelines and shit, and the possibility of OGFF7 having its own world, I thought I'd throw this in there. How this can all wrap around back to Zack is that we have like possibly 2 unaccounted for worlds, right? Whatever Johnny's world is, which we see Zack leave that world, so that's probably where he's not at when it comes to the episode intermission ending. But we have a world where there's possibly a stamp with 1 star and a 2 star. That maybe he's in one of those worlds, but also if there's potentially another world that's like the OG FF7's continuity, that's where Zack's at with the episode intermission scene. I don't know how that ties into the lore of FF7, because he's, at least with the OG FF7's continuity, he's supposed to be dead, but we're turning off into a whole different level of like theory crafting at that point, and I'm not trying to get into that stuff. Let's kind of get back to like the focus of the video, the Zack scene with episode intermission. Now that we've have Rebirth in our hands, dude, I don't know where that takes place because I've always thought it was taking place after Remake, and then that obviously doesn't make sense as we discussed in this video because like right when Zack gets to the Sector 5 slums, he immediately goes and saves Aerith, right? Like that's immediate. He saves her from the fucking helicopter and shit, right? So I don't know when the scene's taking place because this is obviously a Zack that thinks Aerith's in that church, which that made sense that it might be post Remake Zack before Rebirth Zack, but then you have the cleaned up Zack and the missing Cloud and the people in the church and so on. I do want to say as we get closer to the end of this video that it is possible that it is Terrier World, but it's like some weird time frame shit, and maybe they didn't think of what they weren't fully done making Rebirth, right? They're still making Rebirth back in like 2021 that shit came out. Maybe they didn't know exactly what they're going to put in the game, so like that time frame's kind of weird there. But also, like, I think if this is meant to be post remake before Rebirth, before they get to the slums, I think it's a bit of a mischaracterization of Zack. Like, I don't think Zack would hide Cloud's body somewhere and then, like, waste time trying to figure out what to say to Aerith when Cloud's potentially on his goddamn deathbed, right? Like, who knows what's going on with Cloud? He's wounded, too, or tired or hurt from his fight as well. I just don't think he'd do that. But also, he's clean. I personally think we haven't seen the payoff yet of that ending for episode intermission because we got nothing in Rebirth that even resembles that shit, right? We got nothing with Zack at, like, the church and the people in the church and wondering where Aerith's at and the wooden cross, if that matters at all. Like, we got nothing of that shit, right? And Zack's alone during that scene, no Cloud. And we see that a lot in Rebirth, but that's when Cloud's, like, safely in bed somewhere, and he's, like, hopping worlds, right? So I think it's possibly just a different world we've yet to see. I think it's, like, something they set up in 2021 with that DLC, and we'll see that pay off in the third game, maybe. So one of the unaccounted for worlds, is it the OG FF7's world? That remains to be seen, but I want to pass off to you guys. So, looking back at the episode intermission ending, if you haven't watched it in a while, Zack opened up the door, wooden cross, people in the church, no Cloud, he's clean. Now that we have Rebirth out, where is that taking place at? When is that taking place? What world is that taking place? All your thoughts, leave in the comments below. This is actually one of the more fun videos I've made in a while. This is actually like a really fun discussion. I don't know that any of it matters. It might not, right? It's possible that it was always meant to be Terrier World and they just like, fuck continuity. Zack's supposed to be dirty. We didn't make him dirty. Oh, the wooden cross is there. That's not supposed to be there. Like, it's possible that that all could be true. But I think if we just look at the evidence that we have, like, it doesn't make sense to be Terrier World, right? It doesn't make sense that those people are there mourning Aerith. It doesn't make sense that he's clean. It doesn't make sense that there's no Cloud. The cross has mattered for all the compilation up until the remake trilogy and shit, and games that came out after that. So I don't know. I think it matters. I think it's potentially a world we've yet to see. Anyways, that's the video. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new, so in the description below. Follow me on Twitter, @DavidYT. That's it. Bye.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like Logain, or leave it like Cobain.